Chapter 1. The House Beyond the Woods. The forest stretched endlessly in all directions, its dark canopy blotting out the moonlight. Elliot Marshall, a freelance photographer on a road trip to clear his head, cursed under his breath as his car sputtered to a halt. He stepped out, his breath visible in the frigid air. His headlights illuminated a narrow, winding path leading deeper into the woods, and in the distance, he saw the faint silhouette of a house. "Great," Elliot muttered. He popped the hood of his car, but the smell of burning oil told him enough. He wasn't going anywhere tonight. With no cell signal and no tools to fix the car, he grabbed his flashlight and decided to investigate the house. The path was overgrown with weeds and littered with broken branches. Each step was accompanied by the crunch of leaves underfoot, but the forest itself was eerily quiet. No owls, no crickets, just an oppressive silence that made the hair on the back of Elliot's neck stand up. The house came into view suddenly, as if the forest had been hiding it. It was an old Victorian-style structure, its windows shattered, ivy crawling up its walls like skeletal fingers. The air around it felt colder, and Elliot hesitated at the gate, gripping the rusted bars. "Hello?" he called out, his voice swallowed by the silence. No answer. The gate creaked as he pushed it open, and the unease in his chest grew heavier with each step toward the house. He reached the front porch, the wooden boards sagging under his weight. The door was ajar, swaying gently in the faint breeze. Elliot shone his flashlight into the darkness beyond. Dust motes floated in the air, and the faint smell of decay and damp would wafted out. He stepped inside, the floorboards groaning underfoot. Inside the house, the interior was as dilapidated as the outside. Furniture lay overturned, wallpaper peeled from the walls, and strange, intricate symbols were etched into the wood. Elliot knelt to inspect one of the symbols, running his fingers over the grooves. "These weren't made by animals," he muttered, his voice echoing faintly. "Or humans." As he rose, his flashlight caught movement in the corner of his eye, a shadow, darting across the far end of the hall. He froze, his heart pounding. "Hello?" he called out again, louder this time. "If someone's here, I'm not looking for trouble." Silence. Elliot stepped deeper into the house, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. The kitchen was a mess, broken dishes scattered across the floor, a refrigerator rusted shut, and more symbols carved into the cabinets. It looked as though someone or something had been living here recently. Scraps of fabric lay bundled in a corner, along with an empty, tarnished bowl. Maybe squatters? Elliot whispered to himself, though the thought didn't ease his unease. A sudden sound, a faint whisper, sent a chill down his spine. He spun around, the flashlight beam dancing across the walls, but saw nothing. The whisper came again, clearer this time, like someone speaking just out of earshot. "Who's there?" Elliot demanded, his voice shaky. The whisper grew louder, turning into a low, guttural growl. Then, a figure emerged from the shadows. The encounter. She stood at the end of the hall, tall and unnervingly still. Her pale skin seemed to glow faintly in the dark, and her eyes, large, almond-shaped, and pitch black, seemed to pierce straight through him. Her long, silver hair cascaded over her shoulders, and she wore a tattered dress that clung to her impossibly slender frame. Elliot's breath caught in his throat. She wasn't human, that much was clear. Her features were too sharp, too perfect, and her presence radiated an otherworldly aura. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice soft but carrying an undeniable authority. Elliot took a step back, his flashlight trembling in his hand. My car broke down. I just needed. I thought this place was abandoned." "It is," she said, stepping closer. Her movements were fluid, almost hypnotic. "And you need to leave." Elliot's instinct screamed at him to run, but his legs refused to move. What are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She tilted her head, her black eyes narrowing. "That doesn't matter. What matters is that you leave. Now." He took another step back, but his foot caught on a loose floorboard, and he stumbled. The flashlight slipped from his grasp, rolling across the floor and plunging the hall into darkness. When he scrambled to retrieve it and turned the beam back toward her, she was gone. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing. The oppressive silence returned, but now it felt suffocating. He spun around, shining the flashlight in every direction, but the house seemed empty. And then he felt it, a cold, breathy whisper against his ear. "You won't survive the night." A locked exit. Elliot bolted for the door, his heart racing. He grabbed the doorknob and twisted, but it didn't budge. He pulled harder, but it was as though the door had fused to the frame. "Come on," he shouted, slamming his shoulder against the wood. The door groaned but didn't open. Behind him, the sound of soft footsteps echoed through the hall. He spun around, pressing his back against the door. The woman stood there again, her head tilted and her lips curled into a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You shouldn't have come," she said, her voice almost pitying. "Now you're trapped." Elliot swallowed hard, sweat dripping down his temple. "Please, I don't want any trouble. Just let me leave, and I'll pretend I never saw this place." She took another step closer, her black eyes glinting. "It's not that simple." "What do you want from me?" he demanded, his voice cracking. Her smile faded, replaced by a look of sadness. "It's not what I want. It's what I need." Elliot's grip tightened on the flashlight. "And what's that?" She hesitated, her gaze flickering to the symbols carved into the walls. "Your blood." Chapter 2. The Truth Beneath the Skin. Elliot's flashlight trembled in his hand as he took an instinctive step backward. The pale, alien woman inched closer, her black eyes unblinking, her movements unervingly smooth. Her words echoed in his mind, "Your blood." "What do you mean, my blood?" Elliot asked, his voice shaking but edged with defiance. She tilted her head, the faint glow of her skin casting strange shadows on the walls. "I mean exactly what I said. Without it, I'll die." Elliot gripped the flashlight tighter, his thoughts racing. "So what? You're some kind of alien vampire?" The woman's lips twitched, almost forming a smile, though there was no humor in her expression. "You wouldn't be entirely wrong." His stomach churned. He'd heard his fair share of conspiracy theories and urban legends during his travels, but nothing had prepared him for this. "You're not human, are you?" She hesitated, her gaze flickering to the symbols carved into the walls around them. "No. My name is Selena, and I am not from your world." Elliot's mind reeled. This wasn't just a bad night, it was a nightmare. But beneath his fear, a flicker of curiosity ignited. "All right, Selena," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "If you're not from Earth, then how the hell did you end up here? And why are you living in an abandoned house?" Selena's black eyes softened, her posture relaxing slightly. "It's a long story." "I've got time," Elliot said, though he wasn't entirely sure he believed it. Selena's story. Selena gestured for him to sit, and though every fiber of his being screamed at him to run, Elliot lowered himself onto a dusty, broken chair. Selena remained standing, her ethereal presence casting a strange glow in the dim light. "I come from a world far beyond your understanding," she began, her voice soft but filled with weight. "We were explorers, seekers of knowledge. But in our search, we encountered something monstrous." "What kind of monster?" Elliot asked cautiously. "An enemy that consumes," she said, her glowing veins pulsing faintly. "They are a race of conquerors, draining entire planets of life to sustain themselves. My people fought them for centuries, but we were losing." Her gaze shifted to the symbols carved into the walls. "During the final days of the war, I was sent to this world as part of an evacuation effort. But my ship was damaged, and I crashed here alone." Elliot frowned. "And the whole vampire thing?" Selena's lips pressed into a thin line. "My physiology requires certain nutrients that your planet lacks. The closest substitute is found in your blood." Elliot's stomach churned again. "So, you're telling me you've been feeding on humans?" "No," she said firmly, her voice sharp. "I haven't harmed anyone in years. I survive on what I can scavenge animals, mostly. But it's not enough. I've been getting weaker." Elliot studied her, his fear mingling with a strange sense of pity. She didn't look like a monster, at least, not entirely. There was a fragility to her, a sadness that seemed genuine. "Why stay in this house?" he asked. Selena glanced around the dilapidated room. "It's a shielded location. The symbols you see are wards protection against detection. I needed to stay hidden." "Hidden from what?" Selena hesitated, her gaze dropping. From those who hunt me. A shared danger. Elliot's heart skipped a beat. Wait, are you saying there are people or aliens looking for you? Yes, Selena said, her voice barely above a whisper. And if they find me, they'll find you too. They don't leave witnesses. Elliot's pulse quickened. This was getting worse by the second. What the hell have I gotten myself into? Selena stepped closer, her movements slow and deliberate. I didn't ask for you to come here, but now that you have, we're both in danger. Great, Elliot muttered, running a hand through his hair. So, what's the plan? Do we just sit here and wait for your hunters to show up? Selena's black eyes glinted with determination. No. If we can fortify this house, we might be able to hold them off at least long enough for you to escape. Elliot bristled. I'm not leaving you here to die. Selena blinked, surprised. You'd risk your life for a stranger? I don't leave people behind, Elliot said firmly, though the rational part of his brain was screaming at him to run. Selena studied him for a long moment before nodding. Very well. But if we're going to survive, we need to act quickly. Preparing for battle. The two of them worked through the night, transforming the abandoned house into a makeshift fortress. Selena showed Elliot how to reinforce the wards on the walls, explaining that the symbols would disrupt the tracking technology of her pursuers. Elliot, for his part, rigged rudimentary traps using tools he'd found in the house tripwires connected to rusted blades, barricades made from broken furniture. As they worked, Elliot couldn't help but steal glances at Selena. Despite her otherworldly appearance, there was something undeniably human about her determination and focus. Why do they want you so badly? He asked as they finished barricading a window. Selena paused, her expression darkening. Because I'm the last of my kind. If they capture me, they'll extract everything my knowledge, my abilities, even my memories. They'll use it to perfect their invasion of this planet. Elliot's chest tightened. So, this isn't just about you. They're planning to come here? Yes, Selena said grimly. And if they succeed, your world will suffer the same fate as mine. Elliot's hands clenched into fists. He'd come here expecting to photograph an old house, maybe debunk a local ghost story. Now, he was standing between Earth and an alien invasion. Well, he said, forcing a grin, no pressure, right? A fateful decision. As dawn approached, the house was as fortified as they could make it. Selena stood by the window, her black eyes scanning the forest beyond. They're coming, she said, her voice tinged with dread. Elliot joined her, his flashlight in one hand and a rusted crowbar in the other. How many? Selena closed her eyes, her glowing veins pulsing faintly. 3, maybe 4. They'll be fast and heavily armed. Elliot swallowed hard, his grip tightening on the crowbar. We can take them. Selena turned to him, her expression softening. Elliot, thank you for staying. He met her gaze, his fear melting into resolve. I'm not just doing this for you. If they're planning to invade Earth, someone has to stop them. Selena smiled faintly, a rare glimmer of hope in her dark eyes. Then we fight. As the first rays of sunlight pierced through the trees, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the forest. The hunters had arrived. Chapter 3. The Hunters' Arrival. The air around the house grew cold, an unnatural chill that sent shivers down Elliot's spine. The faint crunch of footsteps on dead leaves echoed from the forest, growing louder with every passing second. Selena stood by the window, her black eyes narrowed as she scanned the darkness. They're here, she whispered, her glowing veins pulsing faintly. Elliot swallowed hard, gripping the crowbar tightly in his hands. What do we do? Selena turned to him, her expression a mix of resolve and concern. We hold them off. Stay behind me and don't engage unless you have no other choice. Hold on, Elliot said, his voice firm. I'm not just going to stand around while you do all the fighting. You don't understand what they're capable of, Selena said, stepping closer. They're faster, stronger, and better armed than anything you've faced before. If you fight recklessly, you'll die. Elliot met her gaze, the fear in his chest replaced by a surge of determination. Then tell me how I can help. Selena hesitated, then nodded. Stay near the traps you set. If they breach the house, we'll need every advantage we can get. Elliot nodded, moving toward the barricaded door. Selena remained by the window, her eyes fixed on the tree-line. Then, the first figure emerged. The hunters. The alien stepped into the clearing, its sleek, armored form glinting faintly in the moonlight. It was humanoid but unmistakably alien, its elongated limbs and segmented plating giving it an insect-like appearance. A faint hum emanated from its Weapon A staff-like device crackling with blue energy. Two more figures followed, each carrying similar weapons. They moved with eerie precision, their glowing eyes scanning the house as if they could see through its walls. "They're scouts," Selena whispered. "They'll try to disable the wards first." Elliot's heart pounded as he watched the hunters split up, circling the house. One of them approached a section of the wall where the symbols had faded over time. It raised a clawed hand, emitting a pulse of energy that made the air vibrate. "They're disrupting the wards," Selena said, her voice sharp. "We have to stop them." "How?" Elliot asked, gripping his crowbar. Selena didn't answer. She opened the window just enough to slip her hand through, and a faint light began to glow around her palm. The hunter froze, its head snapping toward the window, but before it could react, a bolt of energy shot from Selena's hand, striking it square in the chest. The hunter staggered, its armor crackling with static, but it didn't fall. Instead, it let out a guttural roar and charged toward the house. The battle begins. Elliot backed away from the door as the sound of heavy footsteps grew louder. The first trap-A tripwire rigged to a falling net activated as the hunter breached the entrance. The net tangled around its limbs, and Elliot swung the crowbar with all his strength, striking its head. The alien staggered, its movements jerky, but it didn't go down. It tore through the net with terrifying ease, its glowing eyes locking onto Elliot. "Selena!" Elliot shouted, panic surging through him. Selena appeared beside him in an instant, her movements a blur. She unleashed another energy pulse, this one more powerful than the first. The hunter convulsed, sparks flying from its armor, before collapsing in a heap. "Behind you!" Selena yelled, pushing Elliot aside as another hunter burst through the window. The second alien swung its staff, narrowly missing Elliot as he scrambled to his feet. Selena moved between them, her glowing veins flaring as she deflected the blow with her bare hand. The energy from the staff dissipated against her skin, but the strain was evident in her trembling frame. Elliot grabbed a nearby chair and smashed it against the hunter's back. The alien turned toward him, raising its staff for a killing blow, but Selena struck first, driving her hand into its chest. The hunter let out a strangled cry before collapsing. Elliot stared at her, his chest heaving. That was intense. "It's not over," Selena said, her voice grim. "The leader is still out there." The leader's arrival. As if on cue, the house shook violently, and a deafening roar echoed through the clearing. The third hunter, larger and more heavily armored than the others, stood at the threshold. Its Weapon A massive blade, crackling with red energy, gleamed menacingly in the dim light. Selena stepped forward, her glowing veins brighter than ever. "Stay back," she said, her voice firm. "No way," Elliot replied, grabbing a makeshift spear he'd fashioned earlier. "I'm not letting you fight this thing alone." The leader charged, its blade slicing through the barricades like paper. Selena met its attack head-on, her movements a blur as she dodged and countered with bursts of energy. The room filled with the sound of clashing weapons and crackling energy, the air thick with tension. Elliot circled around, looking for an opening. He spotted the exposed wires on the alien's back A weak point. Summoning all his courage, he lunged forward and drove the spear into the wires. The alien roared in pain, staggering, and Selena seized the opportunity. She unleashed a final, powerful pulse, her glowing veins flaring brightly. The alien convulsed, its armor cracking and collapsing inward, before falling to the ground. Aftermath. The house was silent once more, the air heavy with the scent of ozone and scorched metal. Selena leaned against the wall, her breathing labored, her glowing veins dimming. "You did it," Elliot said, his voice filled with relief. "We did it," Selena corrected, managing a faint smile. Elliot sat beside her, his body aching but his mind racing. "What happens now? More of them will come, won't they?" Selena nodded, her her expression somber. Yes, but we've bought ourselves time. Enough to plan our next move. Elliot hesitated, then placed a hand on her shoulder. Whatever happens, I'm with you. We'll face it together. Selena looked at him, her black eyes filled with gratitude. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope. Chapter 4. Bound by Blood. The quiet after the battle felt unnatural, as though the house itself were holding its breath. Selena sat cross-legged on the floor, her glowing veins pulsing faintly as she concentrated. Around her, the symbols etched into the walls glimmered weakly, struggling to maintain the protective barrier she had crafted. Elliot leaned against the battered doorway, his makeshift spear still in hand. His body ached from the fight, and his mind raced with questions. For the first time, the gravity of what he was involved in hit him fully. These hunters weren't just after Selena, they were scouts for something far worse. "You look like hell," Selena said without looking up, her voice tinged with exhaustion. Elliot let out a dry laugh. "Thanks. You're not exactly glowing yourself." Selena glanced at him, the faintest hint of a smile on her lips. "The wards are holding, but barely. If more hunters come, they'll break through. Then we need to leave," Elliot said, his voice firm. "This house can't protect us anymore." Selena shook her head. "It's not that simple. The hunters weren't just here for me, they were tracking the energy from this place. If we leave, they'll follow. And if they capture me, they'll learn everything they need to invade Earth," Elliot finished, his jaw tightening. Selena nodded, her black eyes meeting his. "We have to stop them here. It's the only way." The looming threat. As the sun began to rise, Selena explained the full extent of the threat. Her pursuers, known as the Arethas, weren't just bounty hunters, they were advanced scouts for an alien empire that thrived on conquest and assimilation. Her kind, the Luminera, had been one of the few civilizations to resist them. But after centuries of war, her people were wiped out. "I'm the last," Selena said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "The Arethas want me because I carry the knowledge of the Luminera. They'll extract it, weaponize it, and use it to destroy your world." Elliot's chest tightened. "There has to be a way to stop them." "There is," Selena said, her glowing veins brightening faintly. "But it's dangerous." She stood and moved to the center of the room, gesturing for Elliot to join her. "The energy in this house, the wards, the traps, everything is tied to me. If I channel everything I have into a single pulse, I can destroy the Arethas' tracking beacon and sever their connection to Earth." Elliot frowned. "But won't that kill you?" Selena's silence was answer enough. "No," Elliot said, shaking his head. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," Selena said softly. "If we don't stop them now, they'll send reinforcements. Hundreds of them. Earth won't stand a chance." Elliot clenched his fists, his mind racing. He couldn't let her sacrifice herself, not after everything they'd been through. There had to be another option, something they hadn't considered. A dangerous plan. "What if we use the pulse, but not to destroy the beacon?" Elliot asked suddenly. Selena tilted her head, her black eyes narrowing. "What do you mean? What if we overload it instead?" Elliot said, his voice gaining momentum. "If we can amplify the pulse through the beacon, we might be able to send a signal back to the Arethas. Something that makes them think Earth isn't worth their time." Selena's glowing veins flickered faintly, her expression thoughtful. "It's risky. If we fail, it could draw more attention, not less." "It's better than dying," Elliot said firmly. "And you said the beacon is tied to you, right? That means you can control it." Selena hesitated, then nodded. "It could work, but I'll need your help." "Anything," Elliot said, without hesitation. The final stand. The two of them worked tirelessly, preparing the beacon for the pulse. Selena guided Elliot through the intricate process of amplifying the wards, her glowing veins flickering brighter with each passing moment. The house itself seemed to come alive, the symbols on the walls radiating energy. As they worked, Elliot couldn't help but glance at Selena. Despite her alien features, there was something undeniably human about her determination, her courage, her willingness to fight for a world that wasn't even hers. "Why are you doing this?" Elliot asked suddenly. "You could have run, found somewhere else to hide. Why stay and fight for Earth?" Selena paused, her black eyes meeting his. "Because your world reminds me of mine. Before the war, before everything fell apart, she offered a faint smile. And because you've shown me that not all humans are monsters. Elliot felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the energy radiating around them. Well, I couldn't let you handle this alone. The pulse. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the Arethas returned. This time, there were more of them, at least a dozen, their glowing weapons casting eerie shadows across the clearing. They moved in formation, surrounding the house with military precision. "They're here," Selena said, her voice steady. Elliot gripped his makeshift spear, his heart pounding. "Let's do this." Selena moved to the center of the room, her glowing veins flaring brightly. "When I give the signal, activate the final ward," she instructed. "It'll direct the pulse through the beacon." Elliot nodded, positioning himself by the control panel. The hunters breached the house moments later, their weapons slicing through the barricades with ease. But Selena stood firm, her glowing eyes locked on the beacon. The room filled with light as Selena channeled her energy, the pulse building in intensity. The hunters faltered, their movements jerky as the energy disrupted their systems. "Now, Elliot!" Selena shouted. Elliot slammed his hand onto the panel, activating the ward. The pulse surged through the beacon, its energy amplified tenfold. A deafening hum filled the air as the beacon overloaded, sending a blinding wave of light outward. The hunters convulsed, their bodies collapsing as the pulse severed their connection to the Arethas. Outside, the sky lit up with a brilliant flash as the beacon emitted its final signal, one of chaos and destruction, a warning to any who might consider Earth a target. Aftermath. When the light faded, the house was silent. Selena collapsed to her knees, her glowing veins dimming to near darkness. Elliot rushed to her side, his heart pounding. "Selena," he said, gripping her shoulders. "Are you okay?" She opened her eyes slowly, a faint smile on her lips. It worked. Elliot exhaled in relief, helping her to her feet. "What now?" Selena looked around the ruined house, her expression thoughtful. "Now, we prepare. The Arethas might not return, but there are others out there, and Earth will need defenders." Elliot nodded, his resolve firm. "Then I guess you're stuck with me." Selena's smile widened, and for the first time, her black eyes seemed almost warm. "I wouldn't have it any other way." As they stepped out into the night, the stars above seemed brighter, as if the universe itself were acknowledging their victory. Together, they would face whatever came next, human and alien, bound by blood and purpose.